The legends and familiar charms will grace KBC once again.
You're the only one I could see. Hey, I've looked all my life for you. Now you're here. Cut me a key, give me a gate pass to your heart. Yeah. Give me your number. 'Cause man was made to serve John. And together we live forever.
The government is targeting.
All right, good morning, and I trust that you've woken up well this beautiful Wednesday morning, a good day that the Lord has afforded you, and we are here to keep you abreast with what is happening in Kenya and beyond our borders. And speaking of Kenya, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition party leaders have now weighed in on the GMO debate. Speaking yesterday, they really took a swipe on the state on lifting the ban on GMO. This is after 10 civil society groups had equally expressed concerns about these genetically modified organisms. They are mumness and not talking about this issue. They even further on went to say that they'll be heading over to Parliament, particularly both National Assembly and Senate, to see how best they can avert what the state talked about when they lifted the ban on GMO. So which way is it? This is even as there's still an ongoing conversation on what is GMO. We'll be keeping tabs on that to make sure you are up to speed with what is happening in respect to that.
Lots has went on yesterday, rather. And part of the things that went on is the Azimio leader accusing the government of failed promises, citing the high cost of living and fuel prices. And this comes at a time where the sugar prices are very high, causing bitterness in homes. So what is happening? So these are some of the things that we'll be looking at in the various dailies. So you are rightly tuned in. Good morning. My name is Stephanie Ayeta.
Now, good morning. I wanted to list some of the parastatals that government is set to offload, or rather relinquish its majority shareholding by 2023. Some of the names include Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Meat Commission, as well as 5 millers including Chemelil Sugar Company, South Nyanza Sugar Company, Muhoroni Sugar Company, Kabarnet Hotel, Mount Elgon Lodge Limited, Golf Hotel Limited, Nzoia Sugar Company, Miwani Sugar Company, as well as Sunset Hotel. These are just take-homes from the president's attendance of the NSC launch of the marketplace at a time when government is trying to rein in on runway inflation, as well as just trying to keep its coffers where it's supposed to be, and this is on development. So struggling parastatals, and they're going to be looking to raise capital from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Good morning. This is Good Morning Kenya. In the next few minutes, we're going to be bringing you up to speed with stories that have been making headlines, including that one that I have just mentioned in regard to the NSC marketplace and how this is supposed to increase, investment, not only locally, but also attracting foreign direct investment, as well as something that has taken Kenyans, a majority at least, by storm, or rather by shock, incensed some in awe. And this is in regard to the greatest of all times, a contribution to the society, and this is entirely my opinion, by saying that he would give up his organs to research at when he passes on. I'm talking about none other than the greatest of all time, Eliud Kipchoge. So do keep it right here. We have that and so much more. Good morning. You're watching KBC Channel 1 and this is In the Headlines. I'm Regina Manyara, being the 12th of October 2022. And we have lots lined up for you, including the stories that have been making headlines. And we appreciate your feedback. You can get us on Twitter on KBC Channel 1. My Twitter handle is @RayManyara. Now, the government will, in the next 12 months, list up to 10 mature public enterprises in the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Speaking at the bell-ringing ceremony to mark the launch of the enhanced Nairobi Securities Exchange marketplace, President William Ruto said this will be enabled further through the change of legislation and the current privatization law in the next 100 days, even as the new administration looks to create alternative sources for development capital.
The government is targeting the Nairobi Securities Exchange as an avenue to raise funds for capital development. In the past, the government has floated various products like initial to raise funds for various infrastructural developments. President William Ruto says the state plans to divest from a number of public enterprises.
My administration intends to not only focus on strengthening and deepening our capital markets to become an alternative source of development capital, but also an alternative form of investment to most Kenyans. To affirm this resolve, my administration will revitalize the capital markets by embarking on privatization of state-owned enterprises where divestiture is overdue and strategic.
Some of the targeted entities are in banking, agriculture, aviation and the service sector. Treasury has been dilly-dallying on the issue, with President Ruto today giving the Privatization Commission 12 months to execute the process. The Capital Markets Authority has pointed out a lack of market knowledge as an impediment to Kenya's path in increasing investment opportunities in the market.
The CMA will continue to invest further in outreach programs to encourage our ecosystem of partners, many of whom are in this room, to educate the investing public on how to create wealth in the capital markets.
Stocks and exchange are complicated to the ordinary person and to small business owners. We need to raise awareness, we need to drive education, we need to simplify products, we need to improve experience, and also we need to reduce cost of access.
However, President Ruto says the government is cognizant of the need to protect and promote small investors and individual business owners that will allow participation of all Kenyans in the capital markets, even as it seeks to review current privatization laws.
Public enterprises that are mature should be listed in the next 12 months. In order for us to do this, the government is embarking on review of the existing privatization law with a view to repealing it or replacing it with a legal and less inhibiting and more facilitative policy framework to steward rapid privatization processes.
The president spoke during the launch of the enhanced NSE marketplace, which seeks to provide investment information on market activities to local and international media.
We'll be waiting for updates in regards to the amendment of the privatization law that is going to make this possible. Among the listed 10 mature entities include the Kenya Pipeline, as well as the Kenya Meat Commission, and 5 other suggested sugar millers, including Chemilil there and South Nyanza Sugar Company. Now, on to politics. Azimio One Kenya coalition is threatening to move to court to challenge a ruling by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, declaring Kenya Kwanza the majority coalition in the National Assembly. Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Kalonzo Musyoka says the ruling violated the Constitution and the Political Parties Act and should not be allowed to stand.
The supremacy battle for the control of Parliament is headed to the courts after Azimio la Umoja vowed to contest the ruling by the National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula, declaring Kenya Kwanza as the majority in the House.
You know, this is a country that has come of age in terms of our democratic practice. So Kenyans, without being unnecessarily abrasive or being punitive in any manner, let us follow Constitution 2010.
Azimio One Kenya Coalition Principal Kalonzo Musyoka termed the ruling a mockery to the Constitution and a violation of the Political Parties Act, which sets a bad presidency in a parliamentary democracy. The Wiper Party leader challenging the Speaker to be guided by law to avoid bringing disrepute to the House.
I told you this first of all, because if you are a minority or majority, then that influences the number in the committees. Sindio? And this is a matter ambayo nimezungumza kwamba sisi wenyewe tuko kwa mahakama. In the meantime, we have given instructions to our leadership in the House to remain seized with this matter. And I know they are.
Meanwhile, Kalonzo wants legislators allied to the coalition to shoot down names of cabinet secretaries with integrity questions.
The Appointments Committee must take this matter very seriously. And I want to ask EAC and other governance institutions to really prove the what the Kenyan taxpayer has put on their table. Yeah, if there are people in their history, some of them have been governors, some of them have been whatever, and in the history, the charges are supposed to be leveled against them. And I want to ask the DPP as well to cooperate in these matters.
Still on matters politics, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader Raila Odinga has urged Kenyans to be patient as leaders under the coalition work on pushing reforms to address the high cost of living. Raila, who spoke during a meeting at the People's Tour in Nairobi, said Kenyans were still struggling with the high cost of living despite promises by the Kenya Kwanza Brigade to come to their rescue.
Sisi tunasema ati Wakenya wametoka mbali. Tunajua pale Wakenya wako wakati huu. Hali ni mbaya. Lakini vile wanasema ati baada ya dhiki ni nini? Faraja. Kwa hivyo mimi nataka kuambia nyinyi wanabunge, msikufe moyo. Msikufe moyo. Mimi sijakufa moyo. Mimi sijakufa moyo. Wakati ile ambaye Nyayo alikuwa anafuata sisi hapa. Wakati nilikuwa kusema ngwe ndani ilikwisha, sivyo? Siku ya 40 zinakuja siku hii ikifika, nyinyi mtaona tu, si mtaona tu. Si mimi niko hapa, niko na subira. Kwa hivyo tutaendelea mbele. Mko tayari? Mko tayari? Bunge la wananchi, nguvu mashinani. Bunge la wananchi, nguvu mashinani. Nataka bunge iendelee mbele. Mmesikia ile bajeti yenu, tutapeana hiyo bajeti yenu.
Now, an estimated 6,356 children in the coastal counties of Kilifi, Kwale and Mombasa are currently engaged in sex tourism exploitation. According to a report by the international human rights organization Equality Now, the number accounts for 1.6% of the total population of the 13 to 17-year-olds across the three counties. As Beatrice Katonya reports, cultural norms and poverty are among other factors contributing to child sexual exploitation.
This meeting.
Non-governmental organization Trace Kenya says as much as the government has put in place laws and policies that protect children, there is laxity in implementing them, leaving minors exposed to the dangers that come with exploitation and abuse.
The difficult part has been the implementation of these policies in all regards. Whichever way you look at it, implementation has been the challenge in achieving the welfare of children and benefiting children in the country.
Trace Kenya Executive Director Paul Adhok further warns that offenders are using modern technology, including the internet, to widen their reach of vulnerable children.
Most people take advantage of that, particularly modern times. They use TikTok or other social media platforms to reach out to children and blackmail them after having made them expose themselves, blackmail them to then surrender for sexual favors in return and say, well, I'll not expose you as long as this did happen.
Most victims do not get justice, as many families resolve the matters in-house, while others are pushed to sexual exploitation for financial gains by family members.
These norms and laws are slowly breaking away, and fabrics that frown upon children who engage in early sexual debut are slowly seeping away, and therefore give opportunities for traffickers or exploiters of children to take advantage of the same.
Amanda Nyamane from Equality Now said a report by international human rights organization Out of the Shadows places Kenya at position 22 out of 60 countries in terms of prevention and response to child sexual exploitation and abuse.
Kenya has done quite a bit of work. The government has done quite a bit of work, but with any other country, there is more that needs to be done. We need to put children at the center of the solutions that we're looking at. So even from a legal perspective, we do need to understand what are the root causes for children and how can we assist children to ensure that they don't fall victim to child sexual exploitation and abuse.
Child rights activists acknowledge Kenya is among countries that have put in place laws and policies that protect children, but say more needs to be done to combat child sexual exploitation and abuse.
Now, the National Police Service Commission Tuesday interviewed 10 candidates who were shortlisted to replace the former Director of Criminal Investigation, George Kinoti. The 9 men and 1 woman will now know their fate come Friday this week, when the Commission
They are all career police officers, and it is good to see that the time they have invested in their career and building their career has given what they are today, and I believe we'll be able to get those who are suitable to lead our institution, DCI.
The Commission will submit the top 3 candidates to the President by Friday this week. The President will within 7 days appoint one among them to head the DCI docket. Even as Kenyans wait with bated breath to know who is the next DCI boss, the fate of the 10 candidates who were vetted today now squarely lies with the National Police Service Commission, with the Commission expected to forward the 3 names of the best candidates to the President for appointment. Timothy Kipnoso, Nairobi.
And indeed, Friday we will know the fate of the 10. And as far as my history is concerned, we've never had a female DCI. Well, it might just be this year, but hey, we're not rooting for anyone. Let's wait and see what is going to happen come Friday. Now to Parliament, lawmakers affiliated to the Azimio la Umoja coalition have asked President William Ruto to face corruption head-on. The MPs who were debating the president's speech said for the economy to flourish, graft has to be dealt with decisively. Their counterparts from Kenya Kwanza expressed optimism that the government will transform the economy.
As debate on the president's speech entered final day after 4 plenary sittings,
legislators engaged on policies that can revive the economy, while the president in his speech talked of cutting down expenditure in government as a strategy to live within the budget. Azimio la Umoja MPs called for more bold measures in fighting graft.
Instead of cutting down costs, the government should come up with a wealth creation method. We are not in the mood of cutting costs, we are in the mood of creating wealth.
I think we should focus as a country on misuse of resources, on governance issues, and look at the fiscal discipline in this country. What you can call corruption. And Madam Speaker, I don't understand why the President is finding it so hard to call corruption corruption.
However, lawmakers allied to the ruling party lauded the President's plan to limit expenditure by reducing the budget for government institutions.
I've heard so many members saying that the President didn't talk about corruption. Now, Speaker, I don't believe that barking at corruption, I don't believe that shouting at corruption makes it go away. The approach adopted by our President that says that will ensure that institutions that are supposed to fight corruption are well funded, well resourced, well equipped, non-speaker.
William Ruto will be either like President Kibaki, who left us with a debt of 1.8 trillion, or he will be better. And I am one person who believes if Kenya will not change under the leadership of the chief hustler, it will never change.
Meanwhile, National Assembly has constituted its House Business Committee that is mandated with formulating the business to be transacted in the House. The committee, to be chaired by Speaker Moses Wetangula, also includes Ainabkoi MP Samuel Chepkonga, Nyandarua County MP Faith Gitau, Mandera County MP Umul Ker Kasim, Emuhaya MP Omboko Milemba, Kadhiani MP Robert Mbui, Eldas MP Adan Keinan, Ruaraka MP TJ Kajwang, Laikipia North MP Sarah Korere, and Masinga MP Joshua Mbidhi.
We have tried to achieve both regional, ethnic and gender balance and representation in line with the own standing orders of the parties that we may refer to as small parties, parties that do not constitute parliamentary political parties.
The food prices specifically is something out of this world. That is something that needs to be prioritized by this committee, that this House can be able to deal with issues that can enable the country to go back to where it should.
The House on Wednesday will establish committee on appointments that will vet members of the cabinet. The Senate also concluded formation of all its committees, with the members expected to elect their respective chairs by end of this week.
Now, the National Disaster Management Authority and the Disaster Operations Center are calling on members of the bicameral parliament to expedite passing of disaster management bills currently pending before the August House. The bills, if enacted, will see the strengthening of the disaster management and preparedness policies across the national and county governments. Achala Simon reports.
In the wake of extreme weather conditions occasioned by climate change, players in the disaster management sector are calling for enactment of laws that will strengthen preparedness and risk reduction mechanisms in disaster management in the country.
We have a lot of challenges relating to how legislation is actually put in place. There's a long process which you cannot short circuit.
As a country, we've come a long way in terms of integrating disaster risk management. And the pathway seeks for collaborative efforts.
Already parts of the northern frontier are experiencing adverse effects of drought as the region grapples yet again with lack of rains.
We are seeing disasters are increasing. They are more cyclic, they are more dangerous or more virulent. So it's important that we come together and learn to continue influencing our policy and to continue influencing the programs.
Stakeholders also want a deliberate integration of indigenous knowledge with modern scientific weather prediction methods as a means of tackling adverse weather conditions.
And we hope then that this can be shared even with other counties, other parts of the country as a way of strengthening early warning, early action.
The National Disaster Management Authority and Management Committee also wants more resources resources availed to ensure stakeholders in the sector are well equipped to tackle any eventualities.
We need funds for prevention, funds for mitigation, preparedness, response, and
the stakeholders spoke at the onset of a 2-day symposium preceding the International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction, which will be marked on Thursday, October 13th in Kakamega County. This year's theme is Early Warning for Risk Reduction.
Now, as we take a short break, I'm sure if you have been on social media, you have seen pictures going around of a baby who had a fork stuck onto his skull. And now we had a reaction from yesterday from the Kenyatta National Hospital, and I'd want to read as they put it out there on Twitter, saying that our attention has been drawn to the story circulating online regarding a child admitted at KNH with a fork lodged in his skull. And we wish to assure members of the public as follows. The patient had lost a lot of blood, and as a result, the clotting process was not occurring as expected, and thereby delaying the surgical procedure, as this would have been dangerous to the patient. Information coming to us is that the boy succumbed to the injuries. And there's a lot of debate on social media. Maybe you can tell us what you think about our response, or rather the response of our major hospitals in regard to emergencies. Do they treat them as they should? Our Twitter handle is at KBC Channel 1. For now, we take a quick breather. We'll be right back.
The legends and familiar charms will grace KBC once again. Life cannot always be too serious.
Yeah, man, what's up, yeah?
Hello? We've got to take some time off and laugh, and laugh. And we tickle you down with lots of laughter.
That's why I'm saying I'm who is who. Huh?
With satire like no other.
Tell him to bring it on.
Still, though, something doesn't make me feel at ease. I honestly don't think that my son had done it sincerely as they made me believe.
Now, why would you think that?
Good morning once again. If you're tuning in, this is In the Headlines, and I'm Regina Manyara. Now we start off where we left, and this is updates in regard to stories that have been making headlines in the last 12 hours or so. Now, MultiChoice Group has partnered with Other Short Prize to reward innovators in climate change mitigation. As the world gears for the COP27 next month in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, the initiative is aimed at accelerating circular economic model as a new way to go in safeguarding the planet Earth. And as Ruth Wamboy reports, the recycling economy will be a game changer in addressing waste management problem that has been a headache in most cities across the world.
Healing the planet has been a major concern for nations as climate change effects continue to be witnessed across the board. In this regard, MultiChoice Group has embarked on accelerating the ambition of climate innovators, activists and scientists across Africa and around the world by joining hands with the Earthshot Prize.
It really does say very loudly that we are very committed to the climate action that we have just promised to be able to be part of as a MultiChoice group.
Speaking during the official launch of the Pan-African Global Partnerships, the Earthshot Prize Chief Executive Director Hannah Jones said they are committed to support thousands of lives by solving challenges.
Everything that we do in the Earthshot Prize is centered on helping innovators to get their solutions out to the world, to spark the world's imagination, and then to get support for them so they can scale.
The circular economic model, which has been inspired by nature, is meant to scale up the climate mitigation efforts in the next 10 years.
And we want to shift that narrative because we don't want Africa to move away from being seen as a victim and move to being a continent where solutions emanate from, and global solutions. We believe they lie here, but they haven't yet been exposed.
All the initiative, waste management, reforestation, all those are the initiative that will be awarded by these awards. The larger population of this country is the young people. If you do not involve the young people and the under 35 and below into environmental management, they are the ones to suffer more.
During the launch, Sanaji Manufacturers based in Athi River, one of the finalists in 2021 Earthshot Prize, was hailed for its industrial revolution that does not harm the planet.
When you're hearing voices from the US, from Europe, from the UK saying that this is a really investable idea, that helps us enormously.
The factory produces regenerative fertilizers, feeds and fuels through a circular economic approach that guarantees a green and waste-free future.
Now to the courts, Nairobi High Court has issued orders stopping contempt proceedings against Kenya Broadcasting Corporation acting editor-in-chief Millicent Awor, pending a ruling on the matter. In adherence to the orders, a trial magistrate Eunice Newto directed the cases to be mentioned on the 18th of Senator Okiem Tate has filed a petition seeking restoration of powers of the Clerk of the Senate as a Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Parliamentary Service Commission. Sarafina Robes gave us the details from the courts.
High Court Judge Esther Miners issued orders stopping contempt proceedings against acting editor-in-chief Millicent Awor before Magistrate Eunice Newto, pending a ruling. In the orders, the court further directed the Deputy Registrar to call for proceedings of the lower court case that gave rise to the impugned orders and place the same before the judge. The contempt summons was served in relation to proceedings to a multi-million National Youth Service hearing in March 2022. The case will be mentioned on the 18th of October 2022. Meanwhile, Busia Senator Okiem Tate has filed a petition seeking the restoration of powers of the Clerk of the Senate. This comes after the National Assembly, through two amendments to the Public Finance Management Act 2014 and 2019 and through the Parliamentary Service Act, allegedly stripped the Clerk of the Senate the constitutional mandate as the Secretary and CEO of the Parliamentary Service Commission.
Second sentence.
And a 6-year protracted legal battle between C-Link Holdings and the judiciary over a breach of a lease contract continues, with the plaintiff closing their case. The case follows a suit against the judiciary after the Court of Appeal judges declined to relocate to the leased ultra-modern building over fears of radiation from transmission masts in an adjacent property, leading to alleged massive loss by C-Link
Imam Sheikh Mohammed Swalihu was born in 1949 in Lamu East. The cleric has served as Imam since 1995, having served Jamia Mosque in Nairobi for 27 years. He was buried today at the Kariakor Cemetery. Elsewhere, residents of Kilulu area in Kusio Ward in Mwingi North are pleading with the Kitui County government to deploy a nurse to the dispensary constructed in 2013. The facility remains closed, with residents being forced to travel 20 kilometers away in search of medical treatment.
Hospitali iliyo karibu ni kama kilomita 15. Ile ingine kwa Kuso ni kama kilomita 20. Watu wameteseka sana.
Also, the county government of Trans Nzoia has received drugs from the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority worth 51.7 million shillings for distribution across Trans Nzoia County hospitals. In Uasin Gishu County, a section of traders from Eldoret Wholesale Market Tuesday morning held demonstrations to protest harassment from the county askaris. They claim despite having paid for their operating license, the county officers have continued to frustrate them.
Kama watu ni serikali, mbona wasikuje tu mchana, wachukue tu vitu mchana. Wana time usiku na wanakuja usiku beba vitu.
Mimi nasikia uchungu. Serikali ituambie mahali tutapeleka watoto. Wasikae mahali penye wanaweza kufaidika. Hawa vijana wamesoma, si ati wachasoma. Hawa vijana hizi mapang moja ikichaa ni 1,100.
Meanwhile, a section of election officers from Turkana County now claim they have been shortchanged by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The officers allege that despite them dispensing their mandate diligently, IBC has only paid a section of them their dues.
Mbona niliwekewa 20,000 na other counties walikuwa wamewekewa 27,500 na mapio wengine wenye tulikuwa tunafanya nao pia ni hiyo pesa yenye walikuwa wamelipwa ilikuwa ni tofauti.
Wanatuambia ati wafanyakazi wote ambao wanafanya kazi na serikali ama na NGO wanataksiwa 30%. Wakati watu walirekrutiwa na wakatrainiwa, hawakuambiwa kwamba nyinyi kama wafanyakazi mtataksiwa 30%. Hawakuambiwa. Ni saa hizi ndio wanajaribu kusema. Sisi tunaangalia hiyo kama ni lugha ya kunyanyasa wafanyakazi wadogo kama POs wa IBC.
Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru has asked farmers to register under the National Cereals and Produce Board. Waiguru noted that this is the only way to ensure they benefit from the government fertilizer.
We have already secured over 25,000 bags of fertilizer in our NCPB stores this month, and we are in the course of distributing it to our farmers through our agricultural extension officers.
Now, from the counties, we delve into matters business, where corporate Kenya is urging the government to first track its divestiture of some state-owned entities. The Nairobi Securities Exchange Chair, Kiprono Kitonye, says the delayed listing of the companies by the government has slowed down activities at the bourse. The National Treasury plans to offload its stake in about 10 listed companies such as Kenya Power, Kenya Airways and Consolidated Bank. The National Treasury has in the last 10 years mooted a plan to offload its stake in a number of state-owned enterprises, among them Consolidated Bank, East African Portland Cement, Kenya Airways and Safaricom, to spur activity at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. However, these plans have been frustrated by slow and complicated state bureaucracy. Despite the challenges, some firms have success stories.
But more notably, Your Excellency, we have really penetrated the MSME market. Today, as a bank, we have over 1.9 million Kenyans in the MSME market with us. We went into fund management. We have a subsidiary business for fund management.
For Cooperative Bank, its first IPO raised over 5.4 billion shillings, and the funds came in handy in supporting the transformation agenda of the bank.
The privatization of state-owned enterprises will mark a decisive point in broadening Kenya's appeal to both domestic and international investors.
To reduce the billions of shillings in government bailouts to some entities, the private sector is calling for privatization of a number of parastatals to improve management and increase efficiency.
Equally request the government to consider releasing additional shares in already listed companies, KCB, Safaricom and the likes, enabling us to increase more opportunities, revitalize interest among Kenyans, as well as to help address corporate governance issues.
They say privatization will help reduce and eventually eliminate the need for capital grants, which are increasingly denting Kenya's budget. The boss will leverage on the program to increase awareness of the available investment opportunities and attract foreign direct investments.
The capital markets, the NSC legal framework to enforce very strong corporate governance. This is what has enabled Equity in the last 3 years to be able to raise 150 billion Kenya shillings of foreign loans.
Now on to matters agriculture, where Parliament should amend the Seed Act to make it mandatory for seed banks to be created at the village level to protect Kenya's biodiversity as GMOs are introduced into the food system. Anne Minor, the National Coordinator of Biodiversity Association of Kenya, says farmers might opt for high-yielding GMOs for commercial reasons at the expense of indigenous foods that might become extinct without the seed banks.
The Azimio la Umoja leaders are urging the government to increase area under irrigation and subsidize farm inputs to increase yields instead of relying on GMO for food security.
The Kenyan multi-billion food market, is susceptible to manipulation by profit-hungry multinationals, handing over our food sovereignty to corporate manipulators.
The Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance want the government to shelve the rollout of GMO into the country until further audits on the health safety is carried out through stakeholder sensitization.
The BT maize seed. This will not bring down the cost of maize, since the price is artificially manipulated by the profit-oriented multinationals.
Utafiti gani ambayo kanisa ya Kenya itafanya kuliko yale ambayo yamefanyiwa na nchi zile ambazo zimeendelea kisayansi kama Ujerumani? Utafiti gani utafanya hapa?
The leaders add that local seed companies are at risk of being edged out of business by seed multinationals as well as losing its indigenous seeds.
Lakini kule kuna makampuni ambayo ndio wametengeneza hiyo mambo ya GMO, ambayo inataka kuuza mbegu hizo, na hizo mbegu hizo ikishatumika katika ardhi, basi uwezi tena kurudisha ile ingine ambayo inaitwa ile ya natural.
Kenyan seed will forever be lost to mutated forms of crops. GM crops cannot coexist with organic and non-GM crops due to contamination.
Elsewhere, a consortium of NGOs want Parliament to amend the Seed Act to make it mandatory for seed banks to be created at village level to protect Kenya's biodiversity as GMOs are introduced into the food system.
This is a first step towards reaching out to government agencies and to ensure that that law is changed because it does not recognize farmer-managed seed systems.
The smallholder farmers, and they give us as a country the identity of the country. If we go to eastern part of Kenya, there are those foods that we associate with eastern part of Kenya. If we go to western part of Kenya, there are those foods that are there, and in every other aspect of the country.
Indigenous seeds from material perspective, but they lost their tradition because of the loss of seed.
The NGOs say farmers might opt for high-yielding GMOs for commercial reasons at the expense of indigenous foods that might become extinct without the seed banks. They say introduction of GMOs in Kenya's food system could increase cases of malnutrition since those cropping genetically modified seeds might avoid intercropping to maximize yields.
Finding a situation where, like if you look at America, look at South Africa, GMOs are grown in monocultures. If you visit a small-scale farmer in Kenya, they are growing a diversity because they know the rains might fail. So they are growing their small maize, they are growing their cassava, they are growing their pumpkins, they are growing their beans.
The non-governmental organizations also want post-harvest losses estimated at about 30% drastically reduced to ensure food security.
Now, in case you're wondering what a seed bank is, if you grew up in the highlands where agriculture is predominantly the mainstay, is that once you do a harvest, there's some seeds that you set aside for the next planting season. Now, this particular organization is saying that the Parliament needs to review the Seeds Act to allow, Kenyans actually do that, especially within the county level, so that if you have indigenous seeds from a different locality, they remain as such in light of the introduction of GMOs into the agriculture value chain. We'll be keeping tabs on that. Now to housing, where low-income earners are being encouraged to explore off-plan housing projects as an option for home ownership. Mahiga Homes Managing Director Patrick Mushoki says off-plan housing projects offer developers capital to acquire construction material affordably, thus lowering the overall cost of housing units. Irene Mchuma Odim reports.
Mahiga Homes Managing Director Patrick Mushoki says off-plan home ownership is an affordable way to purchase a housing unit.
Some people tell me even 20 million is affordable. But looking at the economy, how many of those people can be able to afford 20, 30 million? So that is what drove us to this section of where we do between 3 and 6 million. And for the last 3-4 years we have been in business, we have tried to maintain that.
Mushoki says Mahiga Homes has so far delivered 300 homes to off-plan housing investors.
If you look at the setup, the master bedroom is for the man and the wife. So in one room you can put the boys and the other room you put girls. So that means morals will be upheld. In our estates, that house sits on a standalone, on its own plot, measuring 50 by 100. That ensures you have enough space that you can plant grass, you can host people in that place. But still within an estate, we also provide areas where you can hold a party as an estate.
Speaking in Joska, Machakos County, Mushoki said off-plan house development offers developers the option to acquire construction materials at very affordable rates, hence drastically reducing the overall cost of housing units.
So you find a house that was supposed to go for 3 million, you end up building it at 7, 8 million and still not achieve what you're looking for. But we as a company, we've been able to get into partnerships with companies. If it is cement, I'll go to Simba Cement and get it at manufacturing cost.
According to Mushoki, buying off-plan will additionally give an investor the option of tailoring the property's design to suit their needs.
The sporting arena, where reigning world marathon record holder Eliud Kipchoge says he's now set his eyes on retaining his Olympic title in the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris, France. Kipchoge was speaking yesterday in Nairobi when he was feted by the Isuzu East Africa for his milestone achievement after breaking the world marathon record in Berlin 3 weeks ago. Kipchoge, who is also a two-time Olympic champion, said he will be taking a break before resuming ahead of his first race in April next year. Isuzu East Africa will reward Kipchoge with a new Isuzu double cabin pickup dubbed an Eliud Kipchoge 1.59D Max Limited. Isuzu East Africa Managing Director Rita Kavasha said the company will also donate 1 million shillings towards Kipchoge's modern books library at Kapsiswa in Nandi County. At the same function yesterday with Isuzu is that the greatest of all time, that is Eliud Kipchoge. He said that he would be open to actually donating, or rather donating his organs, and this comes after Philip Ogola, a digital humanitarian, actually shocked many Kenyans, including his family members, when he made it clear that he wants his body organs donated upon his demise. And yesterday, during the Isuzu function there, where we had World Marathon record holder Eliud Kipchoge attending. He actually supported Philip Ogola's move in regard to organ donation, and he's quoted saying that, Kenyans have come of age, to understand matters of life and death. We'll be keeping tabs on that, and we wish Eliud Kipchoge all the best as he prepares for his first race in April. Still on matters sports, Wimbledon doubles junior champion Angela Okutoi has secured a scholarship to further her education and tennis career at Auburn University, Alabama in the United States of America. Okutoi made the announcement on her social media accounts.
Okutoi will be continuing with her tennis career and education at Auburn University. The 18-year-old will join the institution on a full 4-year scholarship, which will cover both academics and tennis. Okutoi had been offered 30 scholarships by U.S. colleges last month, but settled for Auburn University. Okutoi made history when she became the first Kenyan to win a Grand Slam title after partnering with Nijkamp to win the Wimbledon doubles junior title on 9th of July at the All England Club in Wimbledon, London. Currently, Angela is expected to compete in the W15 Monastir tournament in Tunisia from between the 17th and 23rd of this month, and W15 Nairobi tournament from 14th and 20th of next month at the current country club in Nairobi before moving to the US in January next year.
All the best to Angela there. Now, it is exactly 39 days to the Qatar World Cup, and Ecuador will make their appearance at the FIFA World Cup finals next month in Qatar, and is among the South American countries that qualified for the global soccer showpiece. Ecuador has previously appeared in the World Cup finals in 4 occasions. The finals will be televised live on KBC Channel 1.
Ecuador finished 4th in the CONMEBOL qualification group to qualify for the finals behind table-topping Brazil, second-placed Argentina, and Uruguay 3rd. They have cemented their position as South America's 4th greatest team alongside Chile, Colombia, Paraguay, Peru, and powerhouses Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. This will be Ecuador's 4th World Cup. They made their debut in Japan and South Korea in 2002, before appearing in Germany 2006 and Brazil 2014. Their best ever finish was a run to the round of 16 in 2006. In Qatar, Ecuador is in Group A with host Qatar, the Netherlands, and Senegal, and they will open their campaign against host Qatar. The team will rely on experienced heads such as former West Ham and Everton striker Enna Valencia and Carlos Gruezo, but have plenty of exciting youngsters coming through as well, with Moises Caicedo and Piero Hicapi being.
KBC Channel 1 holds the exclusive rights to air that global event that is set for November 20th all the way to December 20th, to save that date. That puts a cap on Matters News. Remember, further details are on our website, that is www.kbc.co.ke. We take a quick breather. We'll be back with the dailies. Do not go away.
The world's biggest sporting event is here with us. The FIFA World Cup 2022 in Qatar. KBC Television will air live 28 selected matches, while radio will beam live all the 64 matches. We would like to bring to the attention of the public that KBC is the only station that has exclusive 2022 FIFA World Cup free-to-air FTA broadcast rights for both TV and radio in the Kenya territory, and no other media outlet. Therefore, catch all the FIFA World Cup action live and exclusive on KBC TV and radio. KBC is indeed your true sports partner.
Gonna be sticking around every tomorrow.
Sir, don't look at me, you understand?
At KBC Channel 1, we put people at the heart of events with our captivating weekly news features. Every day, we are breaking new grounds with informative, entertaining, and inspiring human interest stories. On Mondays, 9 p.m., we have The Cabinets. Tuesday, 9 p.m., we get inside the barracks for military tales. We delve in the world of cinemas and theater each Wednesday night. For the young and industrious, make a date with us every Thursday at 9 p.m. Fridays are dedicated for my culture. On Saturdays, we go back in time for history in perspective. And on Sundays, we get to know the process of how things are done and made. KBC Channel 1 News features a whole lot of wonderful viewing experience.
Welcome back to the program. You're still on Good Morning Kenya. Time for us to quickly look at how the dailies are looking like for you this Wednesday morning, starting you off with the copy of the Daily Nation. Matters Education taking center stage. This is even as the outgoing Cabinet Secretary of Education has now said that national exams are set to commence on the 28th of November. He also said that the exams won't be delayed because of anything this year, and so candidates need to adequately prepare themselves for these exams. He also said that the results, the marking will be complete in December and the results released by January 23rd of next year, and also further on went to assure teachers that they will be paid on time. Remember, there had oftentimes been that controversy and issues over when teachers are paid after the marking of the exams, but now he has come to say that that will be done on time. So yes, now exams commence on the 28th of next month. Away from that, high untreated mental illnesses cases among medics worrying. This is even as the world commemorated the World Mental Health Day on 10th of October. That was just on Monday. But going by what data and statistics have for us, particularly in our country, is that suicide rates among physicians have been reported to be higher than in the general population, and there have been reasons given as to why this is happening. Key among them being stressful work environment, genetic predispositions, personality traits, and development and a developed health-seeking behavior, as well as individualism and stigma. These are some of those reasons given as to why suicide rates among physicians and medics are now on the high compared to general population. The report also went to just give the data. This is as compared to the time when we really had the serious cases of COVID-19, citing that at the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, 43.9% of health workers reported harmful alcohol use, and this, they say, is way above the country's prevalence usage of alcohol, which stands at just 12%. So also just giving again other more statistics is that post-traumatic stress disorder is the highest reported form of mental illnesses amongst medics. That is what we are having there in respect to matters of mental wellness, and this is particularly among medics. Also, this comes at the backdrop of that bill that was already assented by the former president, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, on matters mental wellness. Clearly one of those very serious and pertinent issues that we just don't deal with as a country, but largely as the entire globe. Also, search for the next DCI boss narrows down to 3. We had these stories on our GNK news briefs, and going by what we have here is that the 14-day period required for NPS, that is the National Police Service Commission, to advertise, shortlist and nominate candidates for position lapses today. And yesterday those interviews took place. The 10 that had been shortlisted, and that number has now been narrowed down to 3. But the NPS chairperson, Eliud Kinuthia, declined to disclose who the 3 were. Also, those who really featured largely in those interviews yesterday included the acting IG of police, that is Nurdin Gabo, Deputy Inspector General of Police Edward Mbugwa, amongst others. So these names are set to be presented to the president. These are the 3 nominees who actually the names haven't yet been disclosed. Also, Raila criticizes Ruto for ending subsidies and lifting GMO ban. There had been a lot talked about of the former Prime Minister. Where is he? Why is he not talking? But yesterday, just speaking to a section of Kenyans, addressed the issue of the lift of the GMO ban as well as the end of subsidies. And we know that this equally happened, particularly when it comes to the fuel subsidy, and also when it comes to the issue of GMO. Talked about how it was wrong for the state to lift that particular ban, alluding to the fact that enough research hasn't been done yet in respect to lifting that particular ban. Also talked about pushing the matter further to Parliament to see how they can avert the lifting of the ban that, you know, the president, together with the outgoing cabinet, did on the 3rd of October. That was just last week on Monday. And we also from that coming down to business at last, as MPs approve nominees to key committee. This is the House Business Committee chaired by the National Assembly Speaker, that is Moses Wetangula, as well as the Deputy Speaker, Majority, Minority leaders, as well as the Majority Whips and Minority Whip. And so the 9 nominees have already been approved to the House Business Committee. This is one of those key and very important committees in Parliament, because they schedule and prioritize matters to be transacted in the House. And even as this approval was happening, there wasn't really much dispute in respect to that, because as of last week, the National Assembly Speaker already established which side or faction has the majority and which one has minority. So also what we expect from this particular committee is that date and time for the vetting of the CS nominees as well as the principal secretaries. And what we have is that they have up until November 3rd, particularly for the vetting of the principal secretaries. And even as we talk about vetting of those principal secretaries, there's still quite a lot of conversation ongoing in respect to some of those nominees, particularly those in the CS's nominees who still have very, very questionable characters and active cases in court. Away from that, coming to the back page of the Daily Nation, Ruto now faults judges in NSSF contribution row. This is a matter that the High Court already pronounced itself on when they said it was unconstitutional to increase the NSSF contribution from 200 to that which was being proposed at 2,000 shillings. And they cited matters of it being unconstitutional because they said it was not subject to public participation. But this is a matter that the president over time always picks it up on it, saying that it is important that we increase that kitty for the benefit of Kenyans, particularly even when they come to the retirement age. So we wait to see how all this will pan out, given the fact that the court has already pronounced itself on the matter. Before I pick you up with what is making news on the Star, Steph, what do we have on the People Daily?
Most stories on the People Daily have actually been mentioned. I think the stories cut across all the newspapers and even in the headlines. But some of the stories that have not been mentioned are the high sugar prices that are stirring bitterness in homes. And we have this in page 2 of the People Daily. Well, the cost of the sugar has increased by more than 30% in the last 1 month, further compounding challenges Kenyans are grappling with in terms of food prices. So in mid-September, a kilogram of brown sugar was retailing at between 125 shillings and 130. But following the biting shortage of the commodity globally, the prices have increased to between 157 shillings and 165 shillings per kilogram, pushing Kenyans almost to the corner as the cost of living continues to escalate. So the director of Sugar Directorate of Agriculture and Food Authority, Willis, said the ongoing global sugar scarcity has contributed to increase in local prices. The thing is that Kenya is a sugar deficient country and thus has to rely with imports largely from the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, that is COMESA. So that is why we're having problems with the sugar prices increasing in our country. Another story making news on People Daily is that the MPs pushed to remove Cherera team from polls commission. So sources have told this paper that Chebukati was set to proceed on terminal leave on October 7th ahead of the tenure on January 17th. However, some government operatives want him to remain on board to give them time to purge 4 commissioners who disowned the result of the August 9th presidential elections. And the 4, of course, we know them. They are Cherera, Justin Nyaga, Francis Wanderi, and Irene Masit. So unless removed from office, the 4 are set to serve until September 2026. So we wait to see how this will actually pan out. Another story making news is that queries on CBC ahead of today's launch of the task force by the DP, that is Gachagua. The team, according to the president, may opt to add persons who possess appropriate competencies as it may consider necessary for the proper performance of its functions. Plus, in the university sector, prepare to make submissions to the working group tomorrow. And from the university sector, we had the head of the newly appointed Commission for the University Education saying that it is critical that universities start thinking on how people who are in the CBC program will be transiting to the university in a short while. The last story that I will sample from this paper is that Wamatangi directs Thika Town hawkers to sell wares from 6 p.m. The county government has reviewed its operation, of course, again from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. But this is a new order effective for only 1 week before another evaluation is done. The announcement was made yesterday, and it brought a halt, a simmering row between the devolved government and the informal traders who had vowed to paralyze the town operation until their grievances was resolved. So Kiambu Town is it's actually planning to seek to restore reorder in Thika Town because it is being fronted for the city status. So these are some of the stories making news in the People Daily, Regina.
Days to the Qatari World Cup, and on the back page of this particular issue of the Standard, being the 12th of October, it indicates that clubs are yet to get money from the 25 billion World Cup fund. And the clubs get paid a daily rate, which FIFA estimates is about 1.2 million for as long as 832 players selected for the 32 rosters are on the national team duty ahead of and during the preparation. Now, the preparation period starts on November 14 and the tournament ends on December 18th. Just to remind you that KBC Channel 1 has the exclusive rights to air that global event, the Qatari World Cup 2022. That's just a top story from the back, if you like, of this particular daily, as well as that, controversy in regard, to organ donation and such. The world champion record holder Eliud Kipchoge, calling on Africans to support donation of human organs to save life. Very not so common, especially in the African tradition, and I don't know if you would be open to donating your organs after your demise. I mean, you're not using them, isn't it? Well, I happen to come from the school of thought that if it is going to save a life and even aid research, then, well, why not? But that is entirely Regina Manyara's, opinion in regard to that matter. Then the front page of this particular daily, it's all about the move by Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition there to just try and rein in on Ruto, and they have taken a stand in regard to matters of the proposed, the lifting of the ban on GMOs, saying that the country is ill prepared for the adoption of genetically modified foods, and they're also joining Kenyans in protesting the high cost of living. In the next 2 days or so, we're also going to be subjected to a review of the energy prices, petroleum prices, so to speak. And Kenyans can only wait with bated breath to see if these prices are likely to come down. That's the front page of the Standard this morning, that has further also highlighted what happened yesterday at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. The boast, if you like, is that the president plans to sell 10 parastatals by end of 2023. Among the proposed parastatals there, we have the Kenya Pipeline as well as the Kenya Meat Commission, to just try and, raise capital, especially for those parastatals that are struggling. The 10 that have been listed include Chemileo Sugar Company, South Nyanza Sugar Company, Muhoroni Sugar Company, Cabernet Hotel, Mount Elgon Lodge Limited, Gulf Hotel Limited, Nzoia Sugar Company, Miwani Sugar Company, Sunset Hotel Limited, the Kenya Safari Lodges and Hotels, especially this one. If you have been traveling across the country, you see the state in which this particular chain of hotels is operating is unsatisfactory, actually the bare minimum. TFC Associated Companies, Consolidated Bank of Kenya, Development Bank of Kenya, Agrochemical Food Corporation, as well as the Kenya Wine Agency and the Kenya Meat Commission. This is according to the Privatization Commission of Kenya. These have been listed there. Then also government intends to reduce its stake in Kengen and the East African Portland Cement. What it wants to do is at least allow to have capital investments into this particular parastatals of farms for the betterment of their running, so to speak. There's been a lot of talk, especially when it comes to looking to how much government has spent, or rather continues to spend, on trying to bail out debt-ridden firms, including the national carrier that is Kenya Airways. And privatization, according to the private sector, might just be one of the effective ways to deal with that. And also, NSSF is going to the Court of Appeal, to appeal a court ruling that barred the rise of monthly payment. According to the president, he agrees with the push to increase the payments, and the move is aimed at giving workers a bigger retirement pot. Now, looking at NSSF at a glance, is that 14.7 billion shillings is what the members' contribution to NSSF in the financial year 2020-2021. Now, the fund in the financial year that ended June 2021, however, spent 6.5 billion shillings in expenses, which is an equivalent of 44.6 billion shillings of the 14.7 billion shillings it received as members' contributions. Well, if you look at the math there, it seems that the fund is actually spending most on operational costs instead of rather than reinvestment and such. Spending around 44% of what you earn to deal with matters of expenses at a cool 6.5 billion shillings. Well, there's a lot of questions in regard to that. Also on the front page, just a recap of what was happening yesterday there with the House Business Committee being effectively formed, so to speak, and now they're ready to be to debate and vet the cabinet nominees. The House Business Committee members are Ainab Koi, a member of Parliament, that is Samuel Chepkonga, Nyandarua Women Rep, Faith Wairimo Gitao, Umar Ker Kasim Sheikh from Mandera, Omboka Milemba Emuhaya, Robert Mbui Kathiani, Aidan Kinan from Elders, Tom Kajwang Ruaraka, Sarah Korere Laikipia North, and Joshua Mbithi Masinga. Now, the House leadership comprising of Majority Leader Kimani Ishungwa, Minority Leader Opiyo Wandai, and their deputies Owen Bayer and Robert Mbui, and Majority Whip Silvana Susoro and Minority Whip Junet Mohammed, who are automatic members. Now, this committee is set to deal on nominate MPs who will sit on committees of appointments and which is going to vet the cabinet nominees, so to speak. And also, in regard to matters of graft, is that former Kipipiri Member of Parliament Amos Kimunya began the fight for his freedom after presenting himself in court to defend himself over allegations of fraudulently transferring a 25-acre piece of land to his company. So he was in court today. This is a case that dates all the way from 2005, and that particular land in question is currently valued at 200 million shillings. But then it was valued at 60 million shillings at the time of transfer in 2005. We'll be keeping tabs on that from the courts. Just to look at other stories that are making headlines, let's go to matters business. We have highlighted what happened with the NSE, and now there's a statement that was issued by Airtel, so to speak, splitting its telco from the fintech aspect. And now on page 22 of this particular issue, it goes further to just highlight what you should expect going forward, especially now all eyes being on a telco giant that has over the last few months or so insisted on being referred to as a tech company. I'm talking about Safaricom there. Now, Airtel Money will now operate as a separate entity from the telco's voice data service, and the CBK said a roadmap for having all its three telcos separate their businesses could be in place by January 2023. Now, the banking regulator said the move sets the stage for other players to follow suit, and now all eyes are focused on Safaricom as well as Telkom. 66 billion shillings is the amount that Airtel Africa PLC raised after selling a 25.7% stake in its local mobile business. Now, Safaricom had initially resisted calls to split its telecommunications business from mobile money when the debate about the dominance came up, and a distinct M-Pesa unit with all rights to operate like a traditional bank would give commercial lenders a run for their money. And this is according to analysts and insiders at Safaricom. We'll be keeping tabs on that. As we close on matters business, trading as it is, crude oil is down by 1.81, that is 1.99%. While the value of gold has gone up by 0.13%. If you're into matters of finances as well as global trading, well, you can get a hold of this particular issue there and look at what is happening. And as far as the value of the shilling, we're still trading 120 shillings and 86 cents against the greenback. That's the dollar. Where we find ourselves, we're in the red, and we're waiting to see if the government's 100 days are going to bear fruit in easing the cost of living. I'm Regina Manyara. I leave in the able hands of my colleague Doreen Arange, is going to be taking us through the next discussion this morning. We value your feedback. Everyone who's been watching, continue tweeting. Our Twitter handle is at KBC Channel 1. I'm Regina Manyara. I wish you a pleasant day ahead.
Robert Gishangi Kabage's ambition in life was to be a teacher, so he went ahead to get an untrained teacher job in Nyeri at St. Paul's Seminary right after his A-levels.
When I went to St. Paul's Seminary, I had a colleague of mine who had come from Kakamega High School. And this colleague of mine had a challenge in one of his feet had a challenge. So he always used to look at me and say, if I was like you, I would join the military. Next recruitment of the military that was advertised, I went and I was just recruited.
He joined the military on the 14th of August 1981, reporting to the Armed Forces Training School, Lanet.
Later, after 3-4 years, I joined the Logistics Corps. So I came to Kahawa as a logistics officer. And I went through the logistics line up to the highest appointment within the logistics. I was the Corps Commander of the Kenya Army Logistics Corps.
Shortly after, Kabage went for his very first mission to Sierra Leone, heading the demobilization, disarmament and reintegration program.
At that time, the situation was terrible. Law and order had broken down. The rebels had taken over the country. But by the time we got there, they had already signed a peace agreement, a comprehensive peace agreement. And now they had agreed that they want peace. That's why we were deployed there as a peacekeeping contingent. So my role was to facilitate the peace process by ensuring or making sure that I prepare those combatants or those people who are involved in fighting to lay down their arms and be reintegrated into the society.
Kabage had to move to the hotspots in the countryside and identify centers with people who wanted to be disarmed.
We had to give them a facility whereby they could come, bring their weapons, hand over their weapons, they are registered, and then they are prepared for subsequent stages. Because once this person lays down their weapon, they need to be assisted to resettle back into the community.
In Sierra Leone, Kabage witnessed the great atrocities of political conflict, roadblocks, women and children with hands chopped off.
Sometimes they would give you short sleeve. Short sleeve is they chop you from here. Long sleeve, they would chop you from here. So what actually one time touched me is when I saw a 2-year girl with both hands chopped. It was very sad.
But his work wasn't without challenges, for the missions were also very dangerous and risky.
I remember in May 2000, I was in a place called Makeni, and I had a British officer with me. We had gone to try and set up a DDL camp. We almost got kidnapped. We were actually assisted by a Kenyan military contingent that was in that area.
Over the years, he went to other nations in pursuit of peace.
After Sierra Leone, I also had the opportunity of being appointed a defense attaché to our Kenya mission to the United Nations to address issues of peacekeeping, deployment of our peacekeepers, police, military, and prisons.
Brigadier retired Dr. Robert Gishangi Kabage was in the very first peacekeeping Kenyan contingent to land in Sierra Leone in December of 1999. 35 years later, he retires from the Kenya Army, joins with like-minded individuals in the pursuit for peace in Africa and globally. Reporting for KBC from Runda in Kiambu County, Amnesty Emmanuel.
Exactly 2 minutes past the top of the hour. You're right in time for our first conversation this Wednesday morning. Our focus centered on just looking at some of those policy gaps that exist when it comes to enhancing delivery of infrastructure projects. Oftentimes, you've talked about how there's a disconnect between what's on paper in terms of policies and actually implementing them. And that is what you're set to converse in the next, 50 minutes or so with my guests who are here on set to help us expand more on that particular issue. To my extreme left, that is Engineer Peter Wendai, who is the former chairman ACEK. He'll be telling us, what this stands for. And right next to him is Engineer Professor Sylvester Abodha, who is a consulting engineer EBK, that is the Engineers Board of Kenya. Karibu sana to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Doreen.
Perhaps you can just start from understanding what ACEK is and what its mandate is before we get further to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. ACEK stands for the Association of Consulting Engineers of Kenya. And this is a body that was established in 1968, and it brings together consulting engineers who are practicing engineering in this country. It is kind of not really a welfare group, but it's a body that propagates the interest of practicing engineers. So it's a link between the practitioners and policymakers and other stakeholders. Yeah.
So it's a link between the two, which is actually what you're trying to just understand at this point, what normally happens and what is the missing link. But let me come to you, Prof. While I was preparing for this interview, I actually came across the fact that we have two categories of infrastructure, which is sort of like found to be a new term. And I just want to believe that it's not one of those things that we would even think about when you think about infrastructure. I found out that we have what we call the, what is it? The hard and soft kind of infrastructure. Is this one of those things that happen when it comes to infrastructure, and what exactly are this?
Thank you very much for having me. Hard infrastructure are the things that they actually put on the ground. So, for example, the road, the building, a water project, that's a hard infrastructure. Soft infrastructure will be things like telecommunications, where you're not really seeing the asset itself, but it's there and it's being used for connectivity. So that's where the difference is between the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. Yeah.
So actually that exists there. We have what you call hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure.
That's true.
All right. Well said. Now, Engineer Peter, of course, infrastructural programs and projects, they focus on quite a number of things. We have system, we have how it's being implemented, we have services, and we can go on and on. But obviously we know that there's something very key when it comes to infrastructure. And of course we'll come to those gaps momentarily as we continue this conversation. But just talk to me about the issue of funding when it comes to infrastructure and what modes of funding exist in respect to this kind of development.
Yeah, infrastructure development, as you know, is very capital intensive because financing road development, ports and railways and dams and telecommunication facilities, all these things is not cheap at all. And the largest spender in infrastructure development is really the government. The government relies on different kinds of sources of financing to achieve or to implement these developments. So you've got exchequer financing, whereby the National Treasury allocates funds from, collected from the taxpayers of this country and are channeled towards financing such projects. You have also donor support or development partner support. So we have development partners like the World Bank, for example, the African Development Bank, European Union, and other bilateral funding agencies, the French Development Corporation, for instance, Japan International Cooperation Agency, who also chip in and assist our government with funding. These are long-term loans. Usually we've got Chinese also who are funding lots of projects in this country. So it's really a conglomeration between development partner financing and exchequer financing. Yeah.
So then can this be categorized into private kind of company financing as well as public kind of company financing?
Well, the private sector financing is somehow different. These are PPP projects, public, private-public partnerships. Yeah. But I'm talking really of the traditional way of funding infrastructure was whereby you use taxpayers' money to fund projects, and development partners also lend this country money. Sometimes it's also grants. But we are seeing a big shift now towards PPP projects, whereby private funds are being marshaled to finance projects, and the private entities are then able to recover their financing or their contribution over an extended period of time. It could be through direct tolling, for example. The Nairobi Expressway is a good example of that, whereby a private entity has put up this massive infrastructure and is collecting revenues directly from the public to recoup back what they have spent on financing this infrastructure. So that's another model of financing.
Oh, well said.
That is gaining a lot of strength.
Yeah, and we'll come to that in a bit, just to understand more of what PPP is, because you've seen a lot of that, particularly in our current development projects in the country. But coming to you, Prof, there's a lot that engineers talked about, the exchequer financing, donor support, you're talking about the private and the public, the PPP, but which is the best mode of financing? Because anytime you talk about infrastructure, even you're having this conversation off the cuff, and clearly financing is one of those biggest deal when it comes to infrastructural projects. So which one is the best mode?
Thank you. I don't think as such we should say that which type of financing is the best. I think the main thing is just we're trying to have a mix. The government can only pay so much, or it can only fund so much on infrastructure projects, and the demand is too high. Of course, if the government had all the money it required, the best would be for the government to actually implement all the infrastructural projects, because there's no.
And it will need to borrow or increase taxes for that matter.
Okay, I was saying from the point of view, if they had all the money, otherwise, if they from the taxes they collect, they had enough money to implement their infrastructural projects. The best thing will be for it to just finance infrastructural projects by themselves. But however, that's not the situation we are in. They have to get extra money somewhere. As my colleague has said, they may have to borrow, they may have to get grants. And this the money is not free. You've got to pay for it later on in life. So it's something which you have to do, so you get the benefits today and you pay for it in future. PPP is a form of infrastructure financing that has come up mainly so that we can limit the amount of money the government borrows, or rather than putting so much pressure on the government to borrow. At the same time, this is also increasing the amount of entrepreneurial spirit. So if somebody comes up with a good idea, for example, the university does not have enough hostels, and somebody says, I can put up the hostels for you. All you have to do is, for example, give me the land, or maybe I have the land. And this is happening in Kenya, for example, the Kwetu hostels that are coming up all over the country. This is an example of PPP, whereby somebody has come up with an entrepreneurial idea that he can put up hostels, relieve the university for the money that they need to put up new hostels as they're getting more students, and then collect the money by themselves. So it's a mix. Nowadays you have to have a mix. If you have to tell the government to fund everything, it'll be very expensive for it. And as you say rightly, it'll mean the government will have to tax us very much more. And that has its own political implications.
Yeah, which is one of those things that we'd even want to hear at this at this point in time. But still staying on that PPP, the public-private partnership, if I've gotten you correctly, so then this means that this is a private entity or a private company coming together with the state or a public organization to see how they can merge together and develop. Is that it?
No, okay, yes and no. It's not necessarily so. But most of the time, since the kind of projects they're dealing with are massive and they involve quite a lot of issues, they have to get the government involved. For example, the example that is put of the Nairobi Expressway. I mean, the expressway is on land which is owned by the public, so the government has to allow it to do that. They also have to cushion the private enterprise from things like political risks. So they have to give a guarantee that irrespective of how many years it takes, they will still be able to get their money. So they've got to give those guarantees to them. And then they also got to allow them to work in a conducive environment. And then, of course, the PPP also, depending on how it is set up, part of it is also they have to give the government some money on a continuous basis. And normally, the project is such that after a number of years, the assets revert back to the government. So the government gets an asset free of charge. The public are able to use the asset, of course, at a price for some time. And sometimes in the long run, the asset also becomes, the use of the asset It's come of age, so now we are applying it immediately. So it's a question. It's a new concept. It never used to be there before. It's a concept. Initially, everybody thought the government should do everything. There's a new concept just come up, and people have money. There's availability of money. The stock exchange. There's availability of money. So you have organizations which have a lot of surplus money, and they want to see where they can put it. What they call private finance. Or financing bodies or equity bodies. So that's how the whole thing came up. Yeah. So it's a new concept. It's catching up. It's relieving the government of the demand for money from them. And so you are also shifting it to the private sector. And they always say that the private sector has got better economies. They're more efficient. They're able to look after things in a better way. So, and maybe get a higher return. So it's amenable to them.
Yeah.
As you say, it's a win-win situation.
Indeed, it is a win-win situation. And what better way to continue growing our infrastructure if not embracing some of these new forms that, we come across. But coming to you, Engineer, talk to me about the role of infrastructural development in Kenya's economy, because we are a growing economy. And just looking at, what happened perhaps in the previous government, there had been a lot of conversations and coming from various quarters that why is this government focusing on infrastructure? Why are we constructing roads yet we have serious issues, as some would say, basic commodities going high, cost of living is high? Why don't we focus on this and then we can focus on roads later? But why is it important to just develop and grow infrastructure of a country and growing your bases on Kenya particularly?
Yeah, infrastructure basically is a foundation of growing economies globally. If you do not have good infrastructure, then you cannot achieve, let's say, food security, because you can have agricultural production, but without access to the markets, then it's of no good. So what infrastructure does is that it opens up the factors of production. So you've got farmers, for instance, growing their crops. They need to send these crops to the markets. They need inputs to be brought to them. There's a direct correlation also between infrastructure and security. For example, if you look at the Nairobi Isiolo Moyale Road, several years ago, to drive from north of Isiolo towards Moyale was a real adventure that could take you several days. In between, you could be ambushed by marauding thugs, militias. But now you can actually drive from Isiolo to Moyale and back the same day. You don't need any security escort. So it has opened up that area. It has dealt with the security concerns that were there. But most importantly, it has opened up markets. I mean, I'm sure if you look at many places around Kenya, rural Kenya, where there have been no roads and suddenly a new road comes up, opens up the place, you will see a lot of economic activity. In Nairobi here, when the Thika superhighway was built, there was a lot of economic activity that was spurred in that corridor. And if you look at the time wastage, for instance, if you don't have good infrastructure, all that actually goes to affecting the economy in a very negative way. So, I mean, infrastructure, comes in a big way to help the economy to grow. I mean, telecommunications. If people cannot communicate, they cannot do business. If there's no telephony, where places where there's no telephone network, people cannot even send M-Pesa to one another, so you cannot trade. So, there are all these subtle points that we fail to look at, but, generally infrastructure development has a very big and direct correlation with economic development. Yeah.
So then, as you've said, in fact, it informs my next point that indeed there's really a direct link between infrastructure and development. But then again, why is that notion around there that people really don't think that that is quite the case? And just from what I said earlier, drawing examples from what really happened even in the previous government, there's a lot of concerns and questions. Address this now. We can look into that later. Is it a question of lack of proper awareness, lack of knowledge and understanding? What would you draw this to?
Yeah, I think to some extent it is lack of proper awareness. And also, the work that engineers do in infrastructure development is not really well appreciated. And I think there needs to be more involvement of engineers in policy development. Engineers need to sit at the table where policy decisions are being made, so that we can have input from engineers in terms of the direction to which infrastructure development is taking place. And in terms of communication to the public for the benefits and all that, I'll give you an example. I mean, if you look at the Nairobi Expressway, from Westlands to Nairobi JK or Mlolongo, could easily take 2 hours or 3 hours on a bad day before the expressway was built. Now it's a 15-minute run. But people really don't see it that way. I mean, people never saw it that way, that with this infrastructure, you can actually do your business faster. You can grow the economy faster, because you can move from Westlands to Mlolongo quickly, attend a meeting there, or do any other business there, and back to Westlands. So there is an adage that says that you pay for good infrastructure whether you have it or not. So if you don't have that infrastructure, you're paying for it in other ways. There is opportunity cost. So if you're spending 3 hours to drive from Westlands to Mlolongo, sitting in the traffic, you're burning fuel, you're burning time which could be used for more productive activities. So would you rather not, let's say, invest in doing that nice road, even if you have to pay for it directly at 300 shillings, it's cheaper to pay 300 shillings directly to drive from Westlands to Mlolongo than to burn fuel worth more than 300 shillings and burn time more than that 300 shillings. So you pay for good roads or you pay for good infrastructure whether you have it or not. So there's a communication issue here that needs to be communicated to the public, that you need to have, good infrastructure spurs economic development and growth.
Well said. Communication as well as education, because if you're well informed and educated, we wouldn't really be complaining about why we're building houses, why we're building roads, why we're ensuring that we have proper telecommunication. We'd actually understand the importance of that in the long shot. But coming to you, Prof, talk to us about these gaps on an extended version, because we keep saying oftentimes that our problem is not really quite in terms of policy. When you talk about whatever sector, the issue is always in the implementation. So it always looks like there's what we have here in terms of what's on paper, written, and at the end of the day, what is being implemented. So in between, what gaps are we talking about that we want to address? Policy gaps in addressing these issues of infrastructure. What are we talking about?
Thank you. I think, as my colleague has just said, the issue is that sometimes these policies are formulated when the engineer himself is not on the table when the policies are being implemented, and he finds himself basically just implementing what has been agreed or decided somewhere. Just as I mentioned earlier, for example, we feel that the county government should employ more engineers into the establishment. But you might find that the current establishment of the county governments does not really allow the place for that number of engineers to be put in. So then we have problems like buildings collapsing at the county level. There's nobody there. There's not enough engineers to actually supervise the actual construction that's going on in the county. And if we, as the Engineers Board of Kenya, for example, we write to the counties and say that you should employ professional engineers, you should have at least three as a minimum, or 4. But they say the establishment does not allow us. That's not what was decided on the day when the county government was put up. So it's the gap there is really, those issues should have come up at the time when the county structure was being established, such that by the time now the county governments are working, it's easy for these to be implemented.
Well said. And I want us to, you want to respond to that?
I just wanted to add on to that a little bit here. The thing is, you need to look at the space of engineers in infrastructure development and how this can contribute towards economic transformation. So you've got policies. For instance, if you look at the successive policies or the policies of successive governments.
Engineer, just allow me to cut you short kindly. I will pick it up with you after this break. You have to take a very quick breather. We'll recoil with more on this conversation with my guest. Stay put.
Are you a holder of unclaimed financial assets? Take advantage of the Finance Act 2022 moratorium on penalties and interests. Surrender any unclaimed financial assets in your possession today. Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. Receive, safeguard, reunite.
Jackie alikupenda sana. Na ile madhara ulimonyesha ni hali ya juu.
Ati nini?
Si pesa nilikuwa nazo.
Lea na watoto wake watapata tabu for as long as I am alive.
So unbelievable, man.
Mimi na yetu tulimalizana kitambo sana.
Nipishe nenda kazini.
Oh. Kwa hivyo kuna jambo lingine wakimbilia huko kazini ama? Lakini mimi sina raha.
Kwa hivyo mimi ndo nimekukosesha raha, sio?
Wala zote na salamu zimfikie Hashimu mwenye cheo kwa karimu kushinda viumbe.
Shetani hatokudanganya tena, hatokughuri shetani, hatokupoteza shetani. Maadamu umetoka katika nyumbani kwako ukasoma hiyo dua, bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allahi wala haula wala quwwata illa billah.
Na yale ambayo binadamu anafaa kuwa nayo ili aweze kuingia katika pepo ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ni kuwa mtu mwenye kutekeleza vitendo vyema na kutubia.
Welcome back and thank you for your valued company. You're still on Good Morning Kenya, holding court with my guest to my extreme left, that is Engineer Peter Wandai, who is the former chairman, Association of Consulting Engineers of Kenya. Right next to him, actually at the center now, what you're having, that is Engineer Professor Sylvester Abodha, who is a consulting engineer at the Engineer Board of Kenya. Now, let me just pick it up with you, Engineer. You were responding to that issue of the gaps that exist between the policy and the implementation.
Yes, my colleague just alluded to the involvement of engineers and competent engineers at county level, but I wanted to take that a little bit higher and address the situation at national level. When policies are being made at national level, you know, if you look at infrastructure development, the place of infrastructure development in this country, it takes a significant proportion of the national budget. Look at the budget we have for this financial year, which is over 3.3 trillion shillings.
Yes.
A very good chunk of that will be going towards infrastructure development. But what you find is that there is no involvement of engineers at that high policy level that will oversee the implementation of this budget or of this policy. And if you look at successive governments, we have always had very good national development plans. Even manifestos of the ruling parties. They talk big about infrastructure development and growing the economy from a perspective of enhancing infrastructure development. But when it comes to implementation, how are engineers involved? I think that is one area where there's a serious gap. And just to give you an example, for instance, right now, if you look at the new cabinet that was unveiled, there's not a single engineer. So when the highest policy-making organ, which is a cabinet, sits to look at how to implement the manifesto of the party of Kenya Kwanza and how that integrates within other national development plans. Who is there in that sitting with the technical skills and know-how to guide the other colleagues? So what engineers have been reduced to is they've been brought to the table as part of the menu. But what we are saying is that engineers need to have the rightful place on the table. We need to have our seats at the table where these issues are being discussed and not being reduced to the menu. We don't want to be eaten. We want to contribute. So this is one of the serious gaps that we need to address in this country. And I'm hoping that when the principal secretaries are appointed, we're waiting for that now, and other technocrats, that will see a significant number of engineers being involved at those levels. In the outgoing administration, I have to say that in the area of infrastructure development, there was very little involvement of engineers. There were very few principal secretaries in infrastructure development ministries who are competent engineers, who are engineers. There was no CS cabinet secretary who in the infrastructure dockets, who was an engineer. And we are hoping that that can change in this new administration so that engineers can play their rightful role in helping this country grow its infrastructure.
But then, don't you think this has just been a conversation over time? Because you've given an example of the previous government, citing this new government. You've even talked about the CS nominees. You're not seeing any engineers there. In the list of the 585, shortlisted PSs, I'm not so sure if there's even a third of engineers there. So then moving forward, what can we do? Because it looks like this is the biggest impediment even in the growth of our infrastructure and development altogether. And then it looks like this has just been more of a talk and conversation around it. But then how do we move past just talking about it and ensure that now we put action to the talk?
Yeah, I think, like I said, we really need to involve engineers. I mean, we can borrow from countries that have been there before. Look at countries like South Korea, who have used competent engineers as part of the economic transformation in that country. Look at China, for example. There's a heavy involvement of engineers to drive the infrastructure development agenda in its contribution towards economic transformation. We can borrow the same. We can borrow a leaf from that and do the same. This is what I think we are failing to do. And if you look at some of the key areas that are mentioned in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, there is food security, which is a very big thing. The government has talked about ensuring that there's food security in this country. Where is the relation between infrastructure development and food security? If you do not have engineers at that high apex level to bring this, to help break down these things and demonstrate to the policymakers how infrastructure development can be used to attain food security, then you will always have this talk that we are trying to achieve food security, but you're not using infrastructure development, you're not growing infrastructure development to attain that. Manufacturing, building of roads and ICT, you need to have that thought process of how this infrastructure development can contribute to the growth of these sectors. So as you're translating the manifestos into action, as you're breaking them down and unrolling them, implementing these policies, there is need to have engineers at the table to help break down these things. And don't tell me that engineers will just be brought in from a technocrat level to advise higher up. We need engineers to sit at that apex level also, so that they can be part of that policy formulation, which will then trickle down to be implemented by the technocrats.
Well said. And I'm really hoping that relevant stakeholders are listening in, into some of these nuggets that you're pushing forth. Prof, important to have engineers on board from the apex, the top, cascading downwards. But again, we also have the issue of locals. And this has been a complaint over time, that even when you look at some of these projects that we are putting up as countries, good number of them will say that they only give us the menial jobs. We don't have our very own locals at the top. How big of a challenge has this been to development and growth of our infrastructure?
Thank you. This is a serious challenge actually we are having currently. I think you know that we are producing about 2,000 engineers in the universities every year. And that some of them are finding it quite difficult to get employment in projects. So you find, for example, with the PPP or foreign funded projects, we find that we have a lot of foreign engineers coming into the country. Of course, the Engineering Board of Kenya is trying its best to limit this by putting in certain conditions, but you find that some of these projects come with they're coming with a loan, or they come with conditions which insist that, for example, if the Japanese are funding a project, they'll say they want their engineering companies to actually come and implement it. So you find that quite a lot of projects in this country are going on, and we're having a lot of, quite a number of foreign engineers coming into the country to implement them, whereas we should be having more of our local engineers getting involved. This will also be take the form of technological transfer. So there should be a deliberate attempt by the foreign companies or the foreign companies that come to implement projects to provide a technological transfer to the local engineers and make sure that the local engineers are also employed up to a senior level in most of those establishments, so that once one project is implemented, then from then henceforth the local people can take over and start thinking of how they can also be able to implement a similar projects, even if the funding is to come from outside. And this has to be at policy level, so that when these loans are being negotiated, these conditions are actually put in, so that it's put in that we can have at most only maybe 5 engineers coming in, the top people, but the rest should be locals. So this is an area which we have been pushing as the Engineers Board of Kenya to implement it, so that we have more of our young engineers getting employed, more of them getting internship, more of them getting experience and mentored, and more engineers become able to implement much bigger projects. For example, again, as I say, even going for my postgraduate studies was actually a question of transfer of technology. There was a program going on, and part of it was that we must train the local engineers to be able to take over, and part of that was to go for my postgraduate studies abroad. So there should be a deliberate effort in that manner, so that we have all these things happening, so that we develop our base and we increase the experience of the people in Kenya.
I hear you, Prof, and well said, but elucidate on that issue just a bit further, because it looks like to be one of those daunting tasks, as you rightly put it. This is perhaps a company coming from whichever place, it could be Japan, China, and they're bringing even funding to the country. So how easy is it when they're coming with all these restrictive measures that we are coming on board with perhaps this mode of financing, and so we want our top-notch engineers to oversee this project? How easy is it for our very own country to just say that at the end of the day we also have professionals?
Yeah.
How easy is that?
Well, you have to try, and you have to put your foot down, and you have to put pressure.
Because it looks like a big problem right now.
And so we are also, so that's why we are highlighting it, so that the people in authority and the people who are sitting down negotiating these contracts know that this problem exists, and they also put their foot down and say, okay, this is not free money. We are actually going to pay back this money. Much as you are giving it to us, it really is a loan, and we're going to pay it back with interest. What are our interests? So everybody is looking at his interests. You're providing us the money, you're implementing the infrastructure, but us, we want to see our engineers trained so that they become good enough in future. Yeah, so it's at that level, and this is why my colleague Engineer Wandai is saying that you need to have more engineers when they're negotiating. When you're negotiating these loan arrangements with the foreign countries, so that they also highlight and say that this is a very important part of it. Because sometimes maybe somebody is feeling that this is not really a very sensitive area. It feels as long as how much interest rate are we paying, how much money will we pay per month, are we able to cope with that, is the government able to do that? Say, okay, if that is fine, then we are ready to go. But if we have engineers on board, they will insist that part of it is not just the financial issues, but also the manpower training. Becomes part of the negotiations.
Well said.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, infrastructure development is a very major contributor to creation of employment. That is one thing we need to acknowledge. So if you have more local professionals involved in these projects, then what that will do is that more local engineers, more local technicians will be engaged on these projects and will be creating employment. But the moment that you reduce the involvement of locals, then you're having graduate engineers leaving our universities. And my colleague, who is in academia as well, has just mentioned that we are producing 2,000 graduate engineers in this country every year. Some of these graduates are being disillusioned and end up selling scratch cards to eke out a living. Yet, we see very large infrastructure projects in this country which are not able to absorb them because they're being implemented by foreign entities who have got very little concerns about creating employment. Now, at policy level, if you look at, for instance, if you look at the Public Procurement Act, there is an issue of local content, which is quite well captured in the Act. 40% of the value of the project must be reserved for local inputs. However, how are those local inputs implemented? We see a situation where local consulting engineers are not involved in these projects, and if you look at how the 40% threshold is achieved, it is perhaps achieved through supply of building materials, cement and steel, logistics such as transport facilities and all that. Now, you will not sweep off these many graduate engineers looking for work by selling more quantities of cement and steel and providing logistical support to these major infrastructure projects. You actually need to engage these young graduates on these projects. The only way to do that is to increase the proportion of these projects that is going towards local professionals. So rather than look at a global proportion and say 40% was spent locally, but spent on areas that are not providing direct employment or a training to graduate engineers, let us look at the part of professional inputs as well and say that must meet the local threshold of 40%. That is, if this project must come with foreign funding and foreign players. After all, as my colleague said, all these loans that we are taking to put up these infrastructure projects will be repaid by local taxpayers. This is not free money. It will be repaid. So we must ensure that our taxes are going towards benefiting our own people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having foreign players, foreign consultants and foreign contractors in this country. I mean, engineering has become, or infrastructure development for that matter, has become a global affair. So there's nothing wrong with having these foreigners playing. But what we are saying is that the rules of the game must be such that there is participation by locals also to an adequate threshold. And 40%, which is there in the Public Procurement Act as a minimum, we still feel it is low. It's low as a threshold, but we're ready to accept that for now and play by that, only if it is being implemented. But is it being implemented? Not very well. So what we are seeing in this country is a big disconnect. On the one hand, you have a big pool of graduate engineers who cannot find employment. On the other extreme end of the spectrum, you have a lot of qualified professional engineers who have worked in this country and helped to develop this country and are reaching a point where they're being pushed out of the periphery. They're being forced into involuntary early retirement because of lack of adequate opportunities. In between, you have policymakers who see no evil and hear no evil and are allowing all these foreign players to come in and play in this space without involving these locals, either the experienced engineers or the graduate engineers who need training and opportunities. And it's a very sad state of affairs. This is something that we need to fix if we are to develop this country and achieve economic transformation.
And you've really addressed quite a raft of issues there. But even as we speak of training, then what more do we need to do to ensure that we actually have proper training and proper capacity building, perhaps even just for the graduate engineers? Because sometimes there's also that perhaps concern of not experienced enough to handle such kind of projects, so then we will bring our foreign expertise into this kind of project. So what do we need to do in terms of training, capacity building, to make them competitive enough in the market to handle some of this infrastructural projects and programs?
You know, training is twofold. There's academic training, which our universities are doing and are doing well. So I will not dwell on that.
Yes.
But once you leave school, then you get into the marketplace. There is a practical training and experience that you need to attain. And this is the area that I'm talking about. We are not going to achieve that practical training for these graduate engineers if we do not have enough opportunities to go around for them. So what we need to do is to ensure that there is enough, as I said before, that there is enough participation of locals on these mega projects so that we can absorb these young graduates. Granted, there are initiatives which are being made. I mean, the Engineers Board of Kenya, for instance, has launched the Graduate Engineers Internship Program, which is a very noble initiative. But as I say, the test of the pudding is in the eating. So whereas the program is it's a noble idea which has been placed out there. If there aren't enough projects that are being rolled out, then where do you place these interns? You can have the idea that you want to train them, but if you don't have the projects, where do you place them? So this is where local content comes in. On these mega projects, we need to see that there is enough local participation so as to provide opportunities for these graduates. At the same time, even on the exchequer-funded projects, one of the biggest problems that we are seeing in this country is this animal called pending bills. This animal called pending bills. And I think there needs to be a policy decision in this country on how to deal with this matter. Projects are being rolled out without adequate budgetary provisions. So what happens then is that engineers are awarded projects, but they're not being paid. So they cannot sustain themselves, and they cannot absorb young graduates and train them. Yeah. Some of the graduate engineers who have been given opportunities on some of these projects, internship opportunities on some of these projects, are not being paid their stipends. I mean, they are accumulating serious arrears. This is because of this problem of pending bills. How do you take a graduate engineer from school, post him to some project in some far-flung place, and not give him his stipends on time? How do you expect them to survive? His mind will not even be on that project. So whereas he's supposed to focus all his attention and energies to learning on that project, he starts having very crazy thoughts, and some of them even just abandon these internship programs and think of other things that they can do. There is a lot of brain drain from engineering into other professions because of this problem of pending bills. So this is also a policy matter that needs to be addressed.
All right, and just being informed that we are sort of like out of time, but I really wouldn't want us to exit this stage without talking about the Vision 2030 blueprint, which is one of those things that you're seeing. Kenya anchored its infrastructural development agenda on that, the Vision 2030 blueprint. This is 14 years later, 8 years shy to getting to that benchmark. From your own point of standing, how far are we in terms of this infrastructural development programs or projects?
Yeah, so Vision 2030, in my view, was a wonderful idea. And they've had good objectives, and they've implemented quite a number of the projects, and I think this has moved the country quite some distance forward, and I think it should be commended. When it started, we didn't think they could achieve so much, but I think they've achieved quite a bit. Yeah. So my view is that they should just continue and make sure that by 2030 they can implement all that they had planned, and then we think of the next step, which we can put on. But Vision 2030 to me was a wonderful idea. Yeah, and it's being implemented, and that's the way to go actually.
Yeah. And you're on the right track.
You're on the right track on that one. I mean, of course, you always have budgetary constraints.
Yes.
And we can't fault anybody for that. Budgetary constraints are budgetary constraints, but as a plan and as a desire and as a way in which we focus our mind where we are to go, it was a wonderful idea.
Yeah. And I mean, there's really quite a lot who could have conversed around these issues. Also, just drawing from what the former Prime Minister talked about, how much we need as a continent per year just to fund our development projects. And the question always underlines it, then how can we get our own source revenues? Really quite a lot you could have talked about with respect to this conversation, but we really have to exit this space for the next conversation. Nonetheless, it's such a cogent discussion. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen, and for affording us the knowledge that you've given us this Wednesday morning.
Thank you, Doreen. And as a parting shot, I would just like to welcome our viewers out there to the Engineers Conference taking place in 2 weeks' time in the lakeside town of Kisumu. The Association of Consulting Engineers will be holding a conference in Kisumu, and a lot of these issues will be on the table. A lot of these issues will be discussed, from infrastructure to blue economy. So I welcome our viewers out there to visit ASEC website, asec.co.ke, and register for this conference taking place from the 26th to the 28th of October in Kisumu. Thank you.
That's in the next 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Well said. And a good place to end it. Again, thank you very much, gentlemen. I have been speaking to Engineer Peter Wandai to my extreme left, who is the former chairman of ASEC. That is Association of Consulting Engineers of Kenya. Right next to him is engineer Professor Sylvester Abotha, Consulting Engineer Board of Kenya, of course addressing and talking about issues of policy gaps to enhance delivery of infrastructure programs. Good place to end this conversation, but Good Morning Kenya continues after this short break. Stay with us.
The legends and familiar chants will grace KBC once again.
With my family seated, can I listen to that music? With my father, with my mother seated together, can we listen to that music together?
Just remove your father from the equation. Kila mtu akae kando. We listen to Zuchu. Everybody, when you go to TikTok, a 13-year-old is saying, what is it called?
Sukari.
Yeah, not even Sukari. This song about nyumba ndogo.
Is it music supposed to be food for the heart?
Okay, I'm not too sure about that. Is co-parenting working? Is it a fad? Is it something that we're just glorifying?
I am not your enemy. You're not my enemy. We just need to live separately so that and then raise this child together. You see, it doesn't have to be toxic for you to.
So what's that? It's conscious uncoupling.
So do you think you would work with Otile Brown again if things were different right now?
Kinyanji, labda ni mpapa.
What is that? Shame on you.
Why are you smooshing your phone?
Ay, Kamene. You've never heard of cryptocurrency? When I will ask if I have heard about it.
I expect to get 50,000 in return.
Yes.
So, when am I expecting to get my money back plus the profit?
Maximum 7 days.
Hey, I am the luckiest. Angie, asante sana for your telling singing no. Signs, telltale signs.
The world's biggest sporting event is here with us. The FIFA World Cup 2022 in Qatar. KBC Television will air live 28 selected matches, while radio will beam live all the 64 matches. We would like to bring to the attention of the public that KBC is the only station that has exclusive 2022 FIFA World Cup free-to-air FTA broadcast rights for both TV and radio in the Kenya territory, and no other media outlet. Therefore, catch all the FIFA World Cup action live and exclusive on KBC TV and radio. KBC is indeed your true sports partner.
Gonna be sticking around every tomorrow.
Welcome back. We are on to the next conversation of the day. If you are a coffee lover, then you definitely know that 1st October was the International Coffee Day. But we want to take a look at where we are as a country in matters coffee farming. There's a time in Kenya where coffee was the leading foreign exchange earner, but where do we stand now? That is a question that we are going to be tackling today, and for that I am joined by the chairman of the Kenya Coffee Producers Association, Mr. Peter Gikonyo. Welcome to the program. We want to I want to get right in. Why is it important for us to even have this discussion before we take a look at where we are as a country in matters coffee growing? Why is it important?
Thank you, and good morning, viewers. My name is Peter Gekonyo. I'm the chairman, Kenya Coffee Producers Association, which is an organization that deals with advocacy and lobbying for the socio-economic well-being of Kenya coffee producers, all the coffee farmers in Kenya, so that they can also be able to reap the benefits of their work. Last week, or rather on first, we were celebrating the International Coffee Day. And why we were celebrating the International Coffee Day is to take cognizance that coffee is providing, or has been providing, the livelihood to over 800,000 households. And if you look at the theme was about coffee and supporting livelihood in terms of what if you look at from the value chain. We start from the coffee producer, we have the processing, we have the market, up to the cup. And all those people are getting their livelihood from the coffee. So that is one of the most critical things that has made us to celebrate. The other one was about when you look at coffee, it creates a lot of employment along the value chain. We have so many stakeholders in the coffee value chain, starting with the producer. We have the government as also a key stakeholder, because when we earn the foreign exchange, that goes to the government, or rather it supports the government activities. And finally, we also have the service providers who supports the coffee industry. So that is also something that made us also to feel that we are happy about coffee. And again, it provides that engagement that when you wake up every day, you have some engagement that you are focusing on. So the theme for this year was about looking at coffee through a 360 degree.
Okay.
Yes.
So now let us take a look at coffee, having been the lead foreign exchange earner in Kenya back in the days in the 80s and the 90s, but currently it is ranked around number 4 after tea, horticulture and tourism. So why are we here? How did we get to this point?
Thank you. Why we are where we are is so many things have happened. Through coffee, we used to be the leading foreign exchange earner in Kenya, but currently it is no longer the case. But we can trace the reasons behind that. One is because there has been quite unpredictable prices of coffee over the years. Apart from the last few years where we could see the prices are good and a bit stable, previously they have been very much erratic, and that gave the reasons for the people who again used to have a big chunk of land in terms of estates, who are producing quite a huge amount of coffee. Then that was converted into real estate, because again every entrepreneur, including a coffee farmer who is looking at coffee as a business, he really needs to look at what is the income and what are the earnings that are coming to place. Therefore, that made a shift from the coffee production to the real estate. The other issue is because, again, other farmers who are smallholder farmers also abandoned the farming, and probably they also engage in other farming activities. Like, for example, there is the issue of avocado. People have actually ventured into avocado and also macadamia. So again, that has also contributed to the shrinking amount of coffee that is also being produced. And you see, when you look at the ranking in terms of even the foreign exchange earner, two things will have to come into place. One is the price, and also the amount of coffee that is being produced. So therefore, you find that the ranking, because again of the production, and also the erratic prices have made coffee not to be in the position. But it is our hope that with the incoming of the new government, we are going to reclaim our position.
Okay.
Yes.
You've spoken about the inflation of the plantation where coffee was planted by real estates, and I believe these are areas like Murang'a and Kiambu where we had coffee being grown, and now it has moved to areas like Nyanza. These are the low altitude areas. So, but we have two types of coffee, that is Arabica and Robusta. So does it mean that we are now producing more of Robusta than Arabica, because now Arabica, the land is now being taken by real estate?
Well, we still produce quite amount of Arabica. Actually, the issue of Robusta, even if it is grown, it's not well, you cannot really well trace it into the marketplace. Because as you know, maybe the areas of Busia, that is where you find Robusta. But generally speaking, the huge chunk of our coffee is actually Arabica. Now, we as the Kenyan farmers, one of the things that makes us proud of what we do, we may not be able to produce as much quantities like any other producing countries like Ethiopia and also Uganda, which is our neighboring country. But then our coffee is highly priced because of various attributes. You know, coffee, when coffee is being traded, what matters is actually the attributes that are in that coffee. So when coffee is being traded, then it is traded using samples. So you pick a sample, you analyze the sample, and you find that this coffee has what you are looking for. And therefore you are able to place your bet on that coffee. And so when this coffee comes to the market, there are coffees that would say this is a must-buy coffee, because of the quality that you are looking for and the market, the destination market. So for us, we take pride in terms of the quality that we produce. I would say from the engagement with the industry players and other people from within the region where coffee is grown, some of the growing countries really would want to get a chunk, just a small portion of the amount of coffee that the Kenya coffee is fetching. But unfortunately, because again of their processes that they use to process coffee and also produce coffee, then their coffees are not as highly priced as Kenyan coffee. Usually our Kenyan coffee is used for blending other coffees. And that is why sometimes you find it's a bit pricey, because it is going to be used to maybe upgrade other low quality coffees so that they are also able to get some good value in the market.
Okay. Yes. So by this, I'm getting to understand that our coffee is of high quality, the Arabica type.
Yes.
So other countries, because I saw somewhere that Brazil is one of these countries that actually mix our coffee, the Arabica, with theirs, which is Robusta, to make it better. So is this a good way that we are headed to? Because a country like Uganda mostly producing Robusta is making more profits than Kenya, where we have high quality, but the returns are not quite as much.
Well, when we look at the returns, we have to look at why are we not getting enough returns. We may be having some coffee that are fetching so high prices, but then when you look at the return that is getting to the producer, the return is a bit low. Why? Is one, because of the cost of production. The cost of production is a bit high in terms of, if you look at the farm inputs that the farmers are using to farm coffee, including fertilizers and other chemicals, also including labor. That is one of the contributions that is making our coffee farmers not really get as much as they are supposed to get. Not because the prices are not good, but because, again, what you have put in that particular coffee, vis-a-vis what you are getting, the margin is so thin. Again, if you look at the productivity, that is the production per a coffee tree, is also quite low, because you find on average is about 2 kilograms. And now the cases you find it's about 1.4 kilogram per coffee tree. So again, you look if you put that, you see that there are some costs that are almost fixed, that you will not do anything much to change them. And therefore, when you reduce, the amount of production is very low. Then it also means that the amount that is going to be retained by the farmer in the form of a return or the margin, it also becomes very low. So, but then when you look at the global trade, if you compare Kenya and Brazil, Brazil is actually is the greatest producer of Arabica coffee they also do quite a big chunk of Arabica coffee.
Okay.
But what makes the difference between our coffee and their coffee is the way coffee is processed.
So the processing bit.
The processing, and also where, for coffee to get that taste, there are some attributes that they also get from the soil.
Okay.
Also, where coffee is grown, when it is grown in the right attitude, it therefore means during the bean formation, the beans are able to pick all those attributes that are coming from the soil and put it in the bean, and that makes it get the right value in terms of even the flavor and other notes that are attributable to coffee. So you find that even the way we are doing Kenya coffee is mostly a lot of coffee is wet processing, where we use a lot of water. But the others that are doing the naturals, or rather they just dry coffee, the coffee is not washed. So you find that there are people who are specifically interested in the coffee that undergoes the washing process, and therefore they rank that coffee higher than the other coffees. So you find that if you look at the amount of coffee that goes to per kilo, for example, if you compare with Brazil, maybe you find that Kenyan coffee is getting much higher in terms of the price as compared to other coffees. And therefore you find the value of a Kenyan coffee is good. But what I would now talk to the farmers to do is to increase that coffee production, that is a productivity per bush, so that then they're able to reap the benefit of the current market prices. Because the more you produce, the more you reduce some of the costs. Because there are costs that will not change because you have increased the production. Of course, there are some costs that will also increase with the production. But if you are, for example, it is putting manure or fertilizer, if you are used to, your farm is supposed to get 10 bags if you do what is recommended. Then you'll also find that even when you are doing the same, you'll also use the same 10 bags. So they will not increase because of the productivity. Okay. But it depends on how you are also doing the agronomic or other agronomic or activities in the farm to be able to get to the right quality and also the quantity.
So you're saying the solution is to actually, for the farmers to increase the production?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, and now matters the input, the high cost of the input that the farmers have to buy.
Yes.
So what is being done? Because I understand that there's the fertilizer subsidy, which you've said is, according to the media brief you gave, is one of the things that, good initiatives that have been made, but it's not sustainable.
Yes.
So speak on that.
It is true that we have seen a lot of government intervention in terms of supporting the coffee production for that matter. And again, if you look at the subsidies are not sustainable. So we need to look at a long-term solution so that then we can be able to have a sustainable farming that is giving farmers the good return that they are looking for. One of the issues that we need to look at is what fertilizers are we talking about? So we need to do a lot of soil analysis and also leaf analysis to understand what is happening with our soil, so that even as the government is providing subsidies, it should be able to provide subsidies geared towards the actual fertilizers that are relevant to coffee. Again, we also need to use a lot of technology. Why do we need to use technology? When the government provides maybe subsidy, for example, they are looking for like providing like 6 billion. So if you consider the Kenyan farmer, the proportion, not every coffee farmer will be able to access that subsidized fertilizer, and is still a producer. So you find that there could be people who are able to access that fertilizer when it is expensive and when it is not expensive, and there are people who will not even be able to access that fertilizer even when it is subsidized. So we are looking at how then do we know our Kenyan coffee farmer and what they need. So we need to use a lot of technology so that when the government is planning, we do like the coffee sensors, so that then we are able to know what is around under coffee, how many coffee bushes that we are talking about, what are the varieties. Then we also do like a soil sample in different regions, so that then we also understand what is the requirement of each area in terms of the fertilizer. So when the government is arranging that, it knows the number of farmers that requires the fertilizer, the area that is covered, and the trees that are required. So it can easily be able to compute the amount of fertilizer that is needed. And then the way it is going to be distributed, it will be distributed to the actual farmers. And then from there, we can be able to even monitor the progress from the production. And that is now a process that you can be able to trace up to the market, up to the cap, to see then the value of the subsidies that the government is providing. Is it really translating into the income to the farmers? Because even now, as we are talking about good prices, there are still farmers that are not enjoying the good prices. Because if you are producing maybe less than a kilo per coffee bush, that for me is like what just God provided you with. You have not put in effort. And therefore you will not be able to reap the benefit of the time because you have not put some efforts. So for me, I would advocate where the government is able to come on board and is able to have an integrated system of all the coffee producing areas and all the coffee producers, so that then you can be able to know how much, when you talk about estates, what are these estates? How much are they producing? What is the number of acreage and what is the number of trees? So that if there is any support the government is giving, be it to the estates, be it to the smallholder farmer,
they know exactly what is needed.
It is known, and you can always be able to attribute the production and also the income back to the farmer.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there any other technology that has been adapted in the coffee sector?
One of the greatest challenges that we are currently facing is actually lack of research in coffee. Because previously we used to have the research, Kenya Research Foundation, which was now converted into Coffee Research Institute at Dakaro. Now what is happening is there is no sufficient funding for that particular institute. And therefore, even with the challenges that are also facing us of the weather, nothing is happening about whether we will be doing coffee in the next few years coming. Because you can see the trend that weather is no longer very much predictable. And if the process of research is not happening, so what is going to happen is some of the land that is currently under coffee will no longer be under coffee. Some of the coffees that are also producing currently, probably because of the vagaries of the weather, may no longer be productive. And therefore, we might find that people are going to abandon coffee, not because they want it, but because there are no interventions of maybe coming up with the new varieties that can quickly adapt to the changing weather patterns. We're also looking at other varieties that can also be used in areas that are also very dry, because these are things that we need to keep on looking at. So again, in terms of the technology, we would also want to look at an area where also we also deploying technology hubs, where farmers can be able to interact with the technology hubs with the challenges that they're also facing in their farms. You do not really need to have, with the technology, you not really need to have that agronomist coming to visit your farm unless now is, for example, there is an outbreak. There are technologies that you can be able to pick a leaf, take a snapshot of the leaf, and then you send it to them and they're able to interpret probably what is happening with that particular leaf, including the berries. And therefore, if that happens, it will also now reduce the amount of resources that are required in terms of supporting agronomical skills. Now, before we get there, remember coffee is also devolved because it is under agriculture. And also most of coffee is also done through cooperatives. So we're also looking at the intervention. In the meantime, what can be done? Currently, the strategy or the policy is the need basis, that you get the services for the agronomist or from the agriculture office when you need it. But remember, previously it was the issue of training and following up. And that is why you used to find that the production of coffee was very high, because you are training somebody and you're also following up to see how they also implementing the training. That made farmers to be accustomed to a particular way of doing the same thing. So for now, because again, when the devolution came, and then there was a shift, immediate shift from now the train and follow to the demand-driven services, then there is a lapse. Again, we do not even have enough, those of the agronomists or the people who are providing those services in the various counties. So again, it is our request that the various counties that are growing coffee, and for your information, you have about 31 counties that are doing coffee in Kenya. So we are asking the county government together with the national government to come together, have a stakeholder interaction, understand each county's need, and then from a national perspective, we can have one common policy that can also be able to cascaded by different counties based on their specific needs.
Right.
That can also be able to bring sustainability of coffee production, and every coffee farmer will not be able to, we will not be looking for other activities because coffee by itself will be enough to provide the livelihood of every household.
Okay.
Yes.
As we come to a close on this conversation, what is the importance of the involvement of cooperatives in Kenya, you know, in the coffee sector in comparison to other countries where they can do direct trading?
For me, cooperatives can still equally do the direct trading. Why cooperative is because one cooperative is a vehicle that brings the peoples who are producing coffee together to be able to enjoy the economies of scale by making sure that they're able to procure goods together and they're able to enjoy the benefit of price reduction. Then when there is also the issue of production, you know you require a lot of machinery sometimes for coffee to be able to be processed unless you are doing the natural coffees. And therefore that is the need for us to have the cooperative. So for me, the cooperative movement or the cooperative is not about bad outfit. If there are issues in a particular and a specific cooperatives, can we deal with a particular cooperative that has an issue?
Okay.
But let us not condemn the cooperatives and also the cooperative leaders because of issues that are happening. We have good cooperatives that are well run, and we also have challenges with other cooperatives. So let us not condemn everybody in terms of the leadership of cooperatives. And then we need to look at what is it that is contributing to the challenges of those who have challenges. So when it comes to actually the issue of marketing, as a small scale producer, do you have enough coffee that is required? Assuming today you want to sell your coffee to US. So how many bags are they looking for? Maybe you require to have a full container. So where do you get a full container as a smallholder farmer who is just having maybe 500 coffee bushes? So there is that need of coming together to do that production, processing, and be able to prepare that coffee for that international market. So there is that need for people to understand that cooperative can still be able to venture into that international market, but also as a caution, remember in the value chain, we all have various stakeholders. If your core mandate is to do the production at the maximum that you can of the good quality, then deal with the issues of marketing. And what we are saying and what we are advocating for, can we also have some level of transparency in the market? Because you really do not have to be involved in every step, in every value chain to be able to reap the benefit.
Okay.
But if there is that level of transparency and traceability in whatever you are doing, you will be comfortable as a farmer because you know, after all, this is the amount of money that I'm going to pay for the entire process. If you find that there is more value in doing that, then so be it. But if you find that there is more value for you to engage in the actual business of actually direct exporting, so be it. And remember, we already currently have two approaches, where we have the direct sale and we also have the auction. So it is a choice for the cooperatives to be able to get into those other avenues in the marketing.
All right.
But they need to understand in every value chain section that what does it involve. Otherwise, you might even find yourself that you're engaging in a business of selling when you are not very much aware about what it involves, and you might end up burning your fingers.
Okay, what a great place to end this conversation. Thank you very much for shedding light on this particular area. That has been Mr. Peter Gikonyo, the chairman of Kenya Coffee Producers Association, talking to us about the status of coffee farming in Kenya. I hope you have taken something from it. Then this is the place to end the program. On behalf of the team, we appreciate your company and enjoy the rest of your programming.
If you are a holder of any unclaimed financial assets, surrender all unclaimed financial assets in your possession to the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority UFAA today without having to pay interest or penalties. Take advantage of the Finance Act 2022 moratorium on penalties and interests. For more information, visit www.ufaa.go.ke/holders. Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. Receive, safeguard, reunite.
Kupata skiza tune ya mambo mema, dial *811*815#.
Mambo mema huwaendea watu wanaosubiri, ila mambo mema zaidi huwaendea watu wanaoyatafuta. Kupata mambo mema ni kufanikiwa, na kufanikiwa ni kutabasamu, kutafakari na kuhesabu mema na baraka ulizozichukulia hatua, ukazitafuta na kuzipata. Amka, tafuta ufanisi wako.
Kupata skiza tune ya mambo mema, dial *811*815#. *811*815#.
Are you a holder of unclaimed financial assets? Take advantage of the Finance Act 2022 moratorium on penalties and interests. Surrender any unclaimed financial assets in your possession today. Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. Receive, safeguard, reunite.
Sir, don't look at me.
Trustworthy news and family entertainment. Log on to KBC Channel 1. Watch what you want anytime, anywhere.
Mommy! You're here. Nana, are you okay?
Aren't you afraid that the rest of your family will be punished as well? Aren't you afraid that your legacy is going to be that of a criminal?
I'm terribly sorry. Please forgive me, my lord.
Such a beautiful pair of eyes. She's quite an attractive lady indeed, but those eyes are too good for her.
Suzanne, you seem to value her as a friend. If you don't wish to be separated from her, how about I talk to the king and have you engaged to somebody from the East Sea?
A girl can say anything when she's in love.
With my family seated, can I listen to that music? With my father, with my mother seated together, can we listen to that music together?
Just remove your father from the equation. Kila mtu akae kando.
We listen to Zuchu. Everybody, when you go to TikTok, a 13-year-old is saying, what is it called?
Sukari.
Yeah, not even Sukari. This song about nyumba ndogo.
Is it music supposed to be food for the heart?
Okay, I'm not too sure about that. Is co-parenting working? Is it a fad? Is it something that we're just glorifying?
I am not your enemy. You're not my enemy. We just need to live separately so that and then raise this child together. You see, it doesn't have to be toxic for you to.
So what's that? It's conscious uncoupling.
So do you think you would work with Otile Brown again if things were different right now?
With the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. This morning, members of the National Assembly will be considering a procedural motion on the limitation of debate on motions on the floor of the House. This procedural motion is moved by the leader of the majority party that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 97 subsection 1